Welcome to the Remembering Session podcast. I'm Chrystal Hart, your host of the Remembering Session podcast, and I'm here today with Beth Slate. And her work is born from a lifetime of breaking conditioning and reclaiming the parts of herself she was taught to silence. After navigating two marriages and deep ancestral healing, she now lives single, fulfilled, and fully self accepting. She brings fierce compassion, wisdom, and authenticity to her mission of helping others transform pain into purpose. And she is a fabulous person. And I'm so happy that I get to introduce you to her and you get a glimpse at her through the session. But Beth, please go ahead and just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and about the work that you do, because I just love what you're doing with for people in this life. It's such a beautiful purpose.
Well, thank you. Yes. Well, I am 60 years old, about to turn 61, and still just feel like I'm coming into my power and my purpose. So I actually am a divorce coach and was in the consulting world for a long time. But I remember when I was 12 years old, a traveling evangelist came through our church and said something to me like, "Oh, you have the heart of a healer." So I thought that meant I was supposed to be a nurse. So I went to a year of nursing school and I was like, oh, this is not me. This is not me. So I ended up going into the work world and I did a lot and accomplished a lot. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about having the heart of a healer. And so I have looked at the experiences that I've had, looked at the work skills that I've had, and it just became so incredibly clear that I could help people through one of the hardest transitions in life, one of the most stressful and traumatic events, to move through it with less fear and less conflict, and to use that, support and that understanding to build back a life that's even better. So that's what I'm doing these days.
I love that so much. And as a person who went through a divorce, I mean, I can't even tell you how much I wish I had someone who could have walked me through that process so that I could have gone through that transition so
Oh,
much better than I did. I mean, it's just so hard. And so I just love that you're doing it. And I do think it's important because you do tell us all the time that doesn't mean that I'm pro divorce, right?
no, no, I'm not. And in fact, about a quarter of the clients that come to me are like, I don't know, should I get divorced? I'm like, I'm not pro divorce. Let's talk about what it would take for you to stay and what do we need to do? So, yeah, I think just there's a lot of conditioning and expectations. And then when we get to that place of divorce, there's so much shame around it. And there's not a lot of support in our culture. And so we get to the point where we think we can't talk about it or reach out to community. And so I'm out to change that.
Yeah, I love that so much. And you and I both know that a lot of times what leads us to the place of divorce too is just that we each need healing. I
Oh,
mean,
so much so.
yeah, healing and I always think about the inner child, when arguments are happening, it's like now all of a sudden the wife is 4 and the husband is 6 and that's just the wound reacting and responding, and so it's like healing, right? But anyways,
Well,
it's
honestly, as I work with my clients, I tell them about quantum healing
yeah.
and how impactful that can be. Just understanding yourself and, understanding the challenges that you might have. And it just brings whole new perspectives. So, yeah, I think it would be a great tool in healing.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to jump into your session. Beth had a QHHT session with me. Oh, I think it's been 3 months maybe or so ago. And she had just such an incredible session. She also had a Reiki and sound session with me prior to having her QHHT session. And that was an amazing experience. But I would love to hear from you before coming into even the Reiki and sound session. Where were you at? What was going on with you at that time?
Well, in a practical sense,
Mhm.
I moved to Oregon a year ago. So I was up in Washington State, and I have a elderly mother. She's 87, and she also lived in Washington State. but my son and his family live in Newport on the Oregon coast, and I have grandbabies, and I didn't want to miss out on being there. So I decided to move down to be closer to them. The problem was I had to bring my mother with me because she could not be up there alone, and I couldn't sort of keep an eye on her um, from 6 hours away. So I bought a home and moved her into my mother-in-law cottage. And we have always had a very challenging relationship, very challenging. And there have been some decent moments, but a lot of bad moments. And so this last year was a real ground level. It hasn't improved. It's still bad. And I couldn't get away because she's 10 feet out my door. So I also decided this was the year that I was going to pivot my work into divorce coaching. And so I had a lot going on that I was trying to manifest in my life with this sort of, stressor irritant. And I just was feeling defeated. And I was feeling like, I just don't want this life anymore. I want a different life. And
Mm,
I'm just tired. I think the word I used was I was soul tired.
you did.
And said, come in and let's do a Reiki session. And so we did.
Yeah, I remember that too. That is exactly what you said. You said, I don't know what else to call it, but I'm so tired. And even from your Reiki and sound session, how did you feel after that even?
You know, I, it was, I, eh, our quantum healing session was beyond
Mhm.
amazing. But I think it was the Reiki session that set that into the container that would hold that next session. Because what happened was almost immediately in that session, um, I was transported to a place that I had been once before, about 4 years before. Um, and it was in meeting my Native American ancestor. And so when we started our Reiki session, here I am standing in front of them. And I remember thinking, oh, come on, I'm making this stuff up. And so much happened in a short period of time that was transformative because I remember like him standing in front of me, and all of a sudden I realized all of my guides, I don't know how I knew they were my guides, but I recognized them. I had had them come up in my life in other ways, and they were all standing around us in a circle, and we're standing in the center. And I remember just communicating, and he knew how soul tired I was.
Mm.
And the answer was, that's because you've forgotten. And I'm like, forgotten what? And he's like, you chose to be the ancestral healer for your line. You chose this
Mm.
path. Did you think it was going to be easy? And I remember thinking, it didn't feel judgmental when he said it, right? But I remember thinking, oh, oh. And then I did sort of start to remember. And for a
Mhm.
period of time, and this was the part that just was like, I was so ready for the truth in our next session because of that Reiki session. My guides basically took turns sharing stories about my life. And it was like, they said, first of all, when you said, I'm going to go be the healer of my ancestral line, we're like, we want to be on her team. We want this. She's good. We want to be a part of this. So we're your team. We're your badass team, basically. And they said, do you remember when this thing happened to you? And then instead of not making the right decision, you did great and you learned and you did this thing. And they all started telling these stories. And my native ancestor looked at me and said, the way that you heal your ancestral line is that you experience the things that happened to your ancestors. And the way you heal it is making a different choice on how you respond. And it was like, at least that was true for me. And so they started bringing up all of these things, traumatic events in my life, challenges and things. And every time, and they're like, and you did this thing, and we were so excited, and it was so great. And I remember coming out of that with this profound sense of remembering and purpose, strength, and just power. And so that was what I left with, knowing that we were going to move into a quantum healing session. And so that's kind of what set the stage.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember I could tell there was such even from that Reiki session, there was already just such a massive shift that was headed from that soul tired into, ah, I remember, it was yeah, it was the coolest thing. So now we've gone into that, and now we moved into the QHHT sessions. So we
Yeah.
do it in 2 parts, and the very first part of it was, the time where you and I sit down and you get to share your life story and health things so that we can ask for healing. So tell me a little bit about how that process was for you.
I think it was, think that so in a just a very authentic way, I was sort of judging myself in our communication because I felt like I was a little bit of the observer watching me share these things with you because your questions were, just tell me about your life. And as I'm moving from childhood on, I think I was just getting angrier with myself because the
Mm.
things that I brought up were mostly the bad things, the traumatic things. And when you say, what made you you? What were the big things that impacted you? I mean, logically, we know that negativity and things that are sad or painful are very impactful for us. Sometimes much more so than just joy or beautiful moments. But I think hearing it out loud, I had to really sit down and not judge myself for this lifetime of hard lessons.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yeah, I can see that. I can 100% see that perspective. Was there from that, did anything shift and change from having that conversation and just getting everything out on the table, just revealing kind of things you would not normally tell just anyone, right? Like, your
Well,
biggest,
a
darkest
couple of
secrets,
things
really.
changed because I think at one point I said something and you were like, "Wait, why aren't you telling people your story?" And I think that was a really impactful moment for me because I did start to tell my story. Now it's just been about 4 or 5 months, but it's been really amazing to not be so self-protective of all the things that have been my challenges and that I've learned through pain and suffering and sorrow, um, to share that as the wounded healer, right? As the person who is, hey, listen, I've had this experience. This is what I got from it. Your mileage may vary, but I think it made me feel both softer and more powerful at the same time. And so that was, if we had stopped it right there, it started me on a road of loving all my parts. And what
Mm.
that actually led to, and I don't think I've shared this with you, was I started thinking about myself as a powerful person, right? And I've always known I've been a powerful person. And yet I had this breakdown, uh, probably 2 months ago after our session. And it was, I am so powerful and I hate it. I don't
Mm.
want to be powerful. And so the more that I sat with it and the more that I thought about everything that we went through, it made sense why. Because I was raised in a highly religious home where uh, women were supposed to be small bodied, meek, quiet. and self-erasing. And yet, I was required in my family to be the top of my class, the smartest, the most accomplished, and achievements were never enough. So capable and manifesting. But then the minute I did that, I would be shamed for it. So it was a conditioning of hating the parts of myself that were some of my best strengths. And I think as I looked through my life of all the things I'd gone through and gained from these moments, it was really the first moment when I was like, oh, that's not a bad thing. It's
Mhm.
Earth School. And I actually love who I am today, but I have to love those things too.
Yes, 100%. Oh, I love that so much, and I have noticed that you're sharing your story more, and I love that, and I think we've had additional conversation just around the idea of, because you're a coach,
Uh-huh.
which can be very masculine,
Very, yeah.
and in most of our trainings and certifications and all of that, it tells us that we don't share our stories, that it's about the client, and it's like, well, that's the masculine way.
Right,
And being more
right.
in the feminine and being able to relate and, and talk and share those things in the feminine. And how has that been?
So what's really interesting is that I saw a a magnitude of impact and new clients and new relationships, and it was a change that I did not expect for the better, and my words resonated for people, and I think they felt less alone, which is of course my ultimate goal for them is to feel that sense of connection and power that comes from connection. Um, and yeah, so it's already come back so much as a blessing. Yeah.
Mm, so good. Well, then moving into, so that's, the intake is, it's very deep and you really share everything. I mean, I've had people tell me that they've shared things with me that they did not have never even shared with a therapist. And so, and I don't force them to do that. I just, it's tell me about your life and they tell me about their life. And so I love being able to have that safe space and to be that person that can hold the space as people share that. Because I do see, even as we walk through that portion, so many things get connected and
Uh-huh.
patterns, and you
Uh-huh.
see things that maybe it's like, oh, because I didn't say this thing out loud and this thing out loud, I didn't realize that they were similar lessons with
Right.
different age frames and different people. And it's like,
Yes.
oh, now I see that repeating lesson that maybe I didn't learn the first time. So it came again, So anyway, so thank you for sharing with me. But moving into the hypnosis. So you had a very typical hypnosis in the fact that we did go through the regression, but you did jump. So, oftentimes in the regression, we stay in one space and time and we work our way through that and we move until we get into the death scene of that particular time. Unless it's this life, we don't go, of course, to the death scene in
Uh-huh.
this life. But so we went into the regression and we landed in one space and time in a lifetime, but then we kind of jumped. And so if you could share a little bit
Yeah.
about your experience and going into the hypnosis and how that was.
So again, I don't think that you could find somebody that is more open to this type of work and yet also just sort of, okay, what's really happening here? And so it just brings me so much joy to be able to have a vocabulary to kind of talk about this because it's been transformative. When we started out and you were kind of just building a picture, I immediately found myself in the woods at a little cottage. And I knew the cottage. I've seen it before in my dreams. I dream about it. And I believe that at that point, I had been gifted that cottage by a herbalist mentor, um, and that I would make tinctures and healing ointments, and then I would go into town and kind of do my thing and sell them, and then just get back out to me in my little garden and herbs and creatures. And it was just still, and it was beautiful, and it was peaceful, and I loved it. And I recognize that as a place that I will often go to in my head when I am feeling overwhelmed, burnt out, with too much information coming in and too much of a focus on achievement. It's like the opposite of all the conditioning of my life of, you're not done. You got more, 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 more. Right. And so here we were. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, this is great. And I love it. And I started hearing this voice. And the voice is like yelling, trying to get my attention. And I remember thinking, what, just, and I think, and I don't know if I remember correctly, but you're like, what is happening? And I'm like, I think it's my great grandmother.
Mhm.
And she is like trying to get my attention. So then as I give her the attention, I'm like, all of a sudden, here I am. And I'm sort of watching her and listening to her. She was not going to stop until I came and dealt with her.
Yeah, yeah, and that is how it was, and you had never met her.
I've seen one picture of her in a family photo and she looks like George Burns.
Yes, you did
That's
say
it.
that.
That's
You
all I remember about her.
Yeah. Yeah, you did say that, but yeah, she was very, like, aggressively wanting to come through. She had messages for you, and there was a lot of with her that if I remember, and you can go into it more if you can remember even more details, but I remember a lot of shame and guilt was a big theme that she kept talking about, was just feeling very shameful and feeling very guilty.
Yeah. What I most remember is that she was feeling very unseen and that
Mm,
she had think she felt bitter about things that had happened to her, but it was more like uh the only way she felt she had any value was to manipulate other people. And she would cause fights between men. She would say ugly things. She wasn't a kind person at all. But it did come from that place of, uh, I need you to hear me and I need you to love me. And
mm.
she knew. She knew this was not the way to go about doing it, but she didn't know how to be any other way to get that love and validation. So there was that sense of, you know, I'm just going to do this, but I feel bad that I'm guilty that I'm doing it.
Yeah, and then your grandma was there too, but
Yeah.
she didn't wanna come in as aggressively as great grandma.
No, not at all. In fact, to be honest, I don't actually know how many children my great grandparents had. I don't know how many
Mm,
siblings my grandmother had. I know there was at least three or four others. Um, but and I didn't know my grandmother very well. We called her Granny, and she lived in the South, and I saw her maybe six times in my life. We would talk once in a while, but I'm old enough that long distance was 25 cents a minute. We didn't have that kind of money. So
mhm,
you didn't even really call them that often. So my understanding of her really kind of came through in this session because her reaction to her mother was to put a block and spiritual blinders onto the shame, the love, validation, self-understanding, all of those things, self-awareness. She basically just didn't want to draw attention to herself. And she did a lot of things that were not healthy for herself. But at the same time, she didn't, it was like, I got a picture of her like hands over her eyes and ears, like, I don't want to know, I'm not going to hear. type of thing. And she was the victim of, at least what came through was that she was victimized in a sexual way. Um, and there were things that happened to her that she just sort of compartmentalized and never addressed. But she
Mm,
wasn't mean and she wasn't like her mother. She just shut down whole parts of herself because of that. And
yeah.
that led me to my mom.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
I was
think,
gonna say, Beth,
yeah,
before you move to your mom, so what I actually I wrote down notes and I had it backwards. It was your grandma that felt very a lot of shame and guilt, and it was
yes,
great grandma
it was great
was
grandma.
very concerned
Mm.
that the cycle wouldn't end.
Oh, okay.
She didn't realize that her action was going to cause the need for such healing, and it was like she was concerned for you, and that
Oh, that's
you if you
interesting. Okay.
'cause you were
Yeah.
gonna need you needed to be the cycle breaker, and you needed and she was, like, concerned for you, and so you kinda had to give her comfort of, like, I'm good, I got it," I'm gonna
That's
do it," you
interesting.
know?
I love that you shared that because that's a
Yeah.
part I had forgotten. And I do remember that she felt bad about how she acted,
Mhm. Yes,
right?
yes, she did.
But yeah. So that was the shame guilt part. But um okay, interesting. I love it.
Mhm.
And this is the session that just keeps giving.
Yes, I
Yeah.
know, yeah. So I did write those down, and at this time too, you started a thing that kept coming up in your session were
Yes.
the threads, and talking about the threads and the connection. And so even when great grandma and grandma came in, you were talking about, like, the threads connecting the generations.
I still get like goosebumpy when I think about that threads part because you see, but you don't see when you're in session. I saw the threads, but you're not really seeing them. And I understood what they meant. And
Mm,
uh, I think that that behavior and those pieces of my ancestral line continued on through those threads, right?
yeah,
That's how I ended up the recipient of the things that I experienced was through those threads. And so I believe that what came through was I needed to cut those. Part
mhm.
of my healing was you need to cut those ties.
Yep. Yeah, it said in the human form to cord cut and to cut the cords and to go back 3 generations and cut the cords. And even I think, it was with even the versions that we saw in the life too. The woman
Yeah.
in the cottage and,
Yes.
because we carry those things forward with us, and it's like, that's not you are feeling this tug of war in this life about living small or living really big, partially because of that cottage,
Uh-huh.
you know?
Yes.
So
And I think too, I've never been a person big into ritual. And what I have learned over the last several years is even for somebody like me who can move through spiritual dimensions pretty easily, and I feel comfortable with that, anchoring it into this world does often take ritual.
Mhm.
And it can be something simple like, having a string and naming the cord and then cutting it and burning it up. I mean, that could be as simple as that, but it
Mhm.
brings it into this dimension. And I've done that in the past, and I immediately felt the disconnect. And maybe it was seeing it in 3 dimensions that made that so real and to bring it into this realm so I could move forward. So
Yeah.
yeah, I absolutely.
100%. Yeah. It was so cool. I hadn't had a grandmother pop in the middle, like, interrupting. It was like, "Well,
Right?
she's here."
Yeah. What, did you just wait your turn?
She would not.
Oh, no.
So then we moved forward. It was like we grandma and great grandma were, they'd gotten their messages across, and so then we moved forward, and then you moved to the vision of your mother. So go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah. So I remember that I saw her laying in bed with my dad when she was pregnant with me, and she was smoking. Now, my mom's quit smoking when I think she was 9. Her and my dad both smoked. And so I remember watching her and seeing the thread and looking back and then just understanding in that moment about my mom and why
Mhm.
she was the way she was. And I think it bears explaining that my mom, I think the best way to explain it is she is a redheaded middle child, uh, born in the South in the month of August. And she embodies every bit of all of that. Um, and she's always been, to me specifically, very judgmental, very critical. Um, and it was a very sort of push pull thing with her. And when I was, I think the perfect example and culmination of what our relationship was like. When I was 38 years old, I got my first divorce. And her response to me was that she told me I had no value as a person. She thought I'd never had any value as a person. And that once in a conversation in 2000, she thought maybe there was hope for me, but I physically made her sick. Now, I am a wonderful person.
Mhm.
And that's the vision that my mother promoted to me over and over
Mm.
again. And so, yet, uh, because of this pull of wanting to be seen, like my great grandmother, I have tried to outlove her on every way I possibly could think of. And so, we've had a very rocky relationship and she has continued to just 4 months ago, continued the ugliness. And I just would try to let go, but in the back of my mind I kept thinking, listen, I had to learn self-awareness from somebody. I had to learn part of who I am. Some of those good things have to have come from here. So I'm just going to keep trying to talk to her to get her to understand. And I'm going to keep trying to build that relationship with her so she can see the impact of her words and so on and so forth. And in this session, what I came to realize was she has a disability. I have to think of it as she has a disability. She is unable to see the impact of her actions and words. It's like, it's not that she knows and she's just doing the wrong thing on purpose. She truly does not understand. And it is a little bit of like all the pieces from great grandma, add in the pieces from her mother, and then her own brand of never feeling seen and her own piece of that thread that continued on. And she added her own trauma to that. Um, her husband, my father, was consistently stepping out on the marriage. And I know that impacted her. But I think it depersonalized how she treated me and how she kind of communicates with other people for me. It helped me to understand that this isn't about me. This isn't even about her unwillingness. It's her inability to. It was at that point I could cut the thread.
Yeah, absolutely, and in your session, I remember that aha moment. I mean, I knew as soon as you said it because when you came in, she was one of the things you were struggling the most with. It was like you were living, although she's outside of your home, she's on your property, that you deal with her, with
Yes.
this person
Yes.
who is, verbally abusing you, and yet you're having to take care of her, and when you got that vision and you literally said, Oh, it's like you're like, "She's not capable," and you just knew, and I was like, "Oh my gosh," like, you needed to see what you saw and have that realization so that you could go, "You know what? She's incapable of doing this
Right.
thing that I've been pressuring for the
Yes.
last 60 years
Yes. Yes. And
to
that's the
be and to
piece,
do."
is how much effort I put into pushing her into a place that it would be like continuing to ask her to walk if she was paralyzed. Well, just get up and walk. Well, here, I'll hold your hand. You can walk. And I have spent so much mental energy and physical time trying to get her into this space with me from a loving, compassionate space. I've tried everything. I've
Mm.
tried the unloving part too. And it was all of a sudden, I'd never until that moment could let go. And it's now been about 3 months. I have never felt like this in my whole life where I just was like, I no longer feel even an ounce of needing to convince her to see me, to understand, to change. Nothing. I'll bring her coffee. We have great short little conversations. And I don't feel that pull of having to do or be or try with her anymore. I could let go.
I love it. Tell me how that feels to be able to do that.
It's no surprise that when I let go, all of a sudden I had so much manifesting energy for the rest of my life. Beautiful things started to come into my life. It was like I'm no longer pouring water into sand. And
Mhm.
so I feel lighter. I don't feel that constant ache in my heart of an unfulfilled ex, you know? It's, I just have so much more room in my heart and my life for things that are a blessing.
I love that. Room for the blessings. Yeah, I mean, when we grip, and oftentimes that's what we're doing, we're gripping to this idea of what we think or what we expect, and it's like, just let go, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big moment. I was like, "Wow," and I thought how beautifully it lined up with, great grandma coming in, grandma coming in, and now all of a sudden we have mom, and it's like, wow. What a beautiful, beautiful session. Then we left that scene and we did travel back.
We
We
did.
went back.
I'm a
Um,
space jumper. I just go all over.
you were everywhere, but we did go back, which again, once we talk about this next place we went, we can talk about how this all fits together with a lot of
Right.
things that you were not knowing, the questions you had. You know what I mean? So it all just was what you needed to see to gain the clarity needed
So
in
much
moving
so.
forward. So we traveled back and then tell us a little bit about where we went.
So, I wasn't entirely sure where it was, but it was an urban city. But the cars and the people and the way they were dressed was very like early 1900s. Um, and I saw a man, probably like early 40s, um, walking down a street, and he went into a building that was a bank. He just knew he was a banker. Um, and what also knew about him, because I'm sort of like, riding along with him, is he was very angry and miserable. He
Mhm.
was so bitter. He was just bitter. He had on a beautiful suit. And he went to the second floor. And I think that was like not just retail, but whatever the next level up was. Um, and I can still kind of see the office, and he hated being there. He didn't want to be a banker. He was married. He had children. Um, and he was miserable, but he felt trapped. He felt like he didn't have any choices But to be in this hard pushing life of I have to achieve, I have to make money, I have to do this, this is what is required of me. I'm conditioned. My family's been in banking forever, blah, blah. And I think what I remember next is that what I felt next about him was when he was like, I can't get out of this,
Mhm.
was that he died. It was
Yeah.
just, that's how he died.
Yeah.
Uh,
And he was
and
young.
he was young. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I I do believe he may have been my great grandfather on my father's side of the family. So
Mhm.
my father's side of the family was from the Midwest, and what I know is that they were bankers, um, and that my great grandfather and great grandmother died young. They had 5 or 6 kids, and the kids were all raised in an orphanage along with my grandfather. So I never knew him. And we never heard anything about that side of the family because, of course, my grandfather was raised in an orphanage, so no history. But that was the feeling I got, was that he was tied down and then he just died. They both
Mhm.
died. Um, and he felt trapped.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said that it was something like the Spanish flu or something. There was a lot of
Yeah,
sickness,
there was
a
a
lot
lot of
of
sickness.
yeah, a lot of
I
sickness,
believe that
but
was
yeah,
about. Yeah.
and I had asked if you wanted, because you were so miserable being at the workplace, and I was like, "Well, do you wanna go home?" And you're like, "No." And I'm like, "Oh, so it's better to be in the that's even worse than being in this miserable
But I
place."
think the other part that's really interesting was, and I do remember this piece, was that it was okay to die.
Yeah.
That's how soul tired he was.
Mhm.
He wasn't living the life that he wanted, and he felt like he couldn't get out of the trap. And so
Yeah.
death was sort of a welcome end. And
Yeah.
and that was such a juxtaposition between that and the cottage in the woods. And so it's hard to communicate all the pieces of information and context to what ties those stories together, right?
Yeah.
But I believe one of the questions I came in with was, I have built very successful businesses in the past. I have worked so hard that I've lost an ovary, an appendix, a gallbladder, and a hip. You know, and I'm not a sick type of person. Uh, but I have burnt myself out in so many ways. I've had adrenal fatigue since forever, but I have this sort of connection that I feel with that man, or I have in the past, right? I still kind of feel it. Where, but this is what I'm capable of, and this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm supposed to push, push, push. And now that I have this new divorce coaching business, uh, it's like I already know that my capability is turning this into an international business that changes the way we experience family law. Because just know that I could do that. And yet, there's the other side of me that wants to go live in my cottage and play with my herbs and come out to town once a week and just have the squirrels eat off my back porch, right?
Mhm.
And while I know in my heart that building this business is what I am meant to do, I think the question I came was, is it this or is it this? Which is the
Mhm.
most highest path for me, right? Is it banking? It's that get in, make this business really successful, or is it go into the woods and disappear and just live this peaceful, indigenous life? And the answer was, and here's the part that I think that is so powerful. You feel the truth all the way through your bones in these sessions. When the truth comes out, and and the statement is made as to what that path is supposed to be, you know it. There's no doubt. There's no, well, that's something I'll think about. It's sort of like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's it. Because the answer is, for me, why does it have to be an either or? And the answer inside my little pea brain was, because I don't know, I only know how to do one or the other. I don't know how
Mm.
to have boundaries. I don't know how to say no. I don't know how to trust and have faith in the future and believe in myself. All these things, all the little things we don't tell people. And so I think looking at those well worn ancestral paths of I'm trapped, or I'm just going to pretend like my grandmother did, and or like my mom, I'm just not going to be aware. I know I have this disability to know. The truth is that part of the healing I'm going to offer back to the collective is I'm going to choose neither of those paths. I'm going to choose balance. I'm going to choose nourishing myself. I'm going to choose compassion and grace for me. I'm going to choose joy and laughter and grandchildren. And I am going to rest on source and spirit, along with the gifts and abilities I have to build this to the place it is meant to be, where I live a life that is never truly in balance, because that's a dream that we try to chase, but I think is literally my highest and best.
Mm. I love that. Yeah, it was when you received both of those as part of the regression, I was just like, how interesting and divine were those either or
Yeah.
scenarios.
Yeah.
And to just see that disdain that he felt is that also that resistance to this successful, busyness, and then that peace, and, she was just so happy being in that cottage, that woman. I mean,
Yeah.
she was
Yeah.
she was
True.
living her best life,
Yeah.
making her tinctures, and, the people would come and get the tinctures when they needed them, and all these things. And she could be by herself, or, people would come and see her as little or as much as she wanted. I mean, it was just like, and it was like, no wonder we have those ideas, and, they still come with us
Yes.
into these other lives. And it's like that, that's from then. It doesn't need to, it can teach me something in this life, but I don't need it to drive my decisions in this life.
And I think too that when you are somebody who has had the stories that I have, and when you've gone through the things that I have, I would be lying if I said there isn't a every once in a while a poor me and a I just want to escape for a little while, right? In human design, I'm a manifester, and I'm also a before my Chiron return, I was a 2/4, so I'm a hermit. So living out in the woods with my herbs, that's great. Naturally that feels good. But the truth is that um, having these experiences in my life has been, I don't want them to go to waste. And I think part of the reason we go through the things that we do is so we do heal the collective backwards and forwards.
Mhm.
And so running away is okay every once in a while, taking a break, gathering your strength, but to kind of compartmentalize and then live, and I don't want to use the word small, but basically not bring those gifts back to the collective, right? To just kind of
Mhm.
benefit and live for yourself, for me feels wrong.
Yeah.
I get to benefit from the balance. I will benefit from nourishing and nurturing myself. But I chose to be a healer.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so the regression, there was just so many your questions, a lot of them were answered, honestly, like, and that does happen a lot, where oftentimes a lot of the things that we bring forward that we have questions about, you do kind of get some of the answers. I still, when I call forward the subconscious, the higher self to answer the questions, I still usually ask, and ask for continued clarity if there was clarity, but it was like you clearly saw these things because it was some of the questions that you had. But yeah, so going forward, how was it in hearing the answers, come through? You're speaking. I'm asking the questions that you brought, and you're speaking them.
So it was, you know, um, I remember at one point saying, Chrystal, I'm moving between third person and I,
Yeah.
because sometimes it would be like I, and sometimes it would say she, and
Or
I don't
Beth.
know.
I would say Beth
Yeah.
a lot too. Yeah.
Did I? So
Yeah.
I think it was that space was sort of like I just talked as it came.
Hmm.
And sometimes it felt comfortable to say I, and sometimes it felt comfortable to say my name or she, right? And I don't I'm going to go back and listen again because again, this is the session that just keeps giving. But it'll be interesting to see when I used I and when I
Hmm.
used she. Um, but again, what I took from that was we all have our truth within us. We do. Um, I actually am writing a book on making decisions, all just going within, mind, body, spirit. You don't need to check in with anybody else. But I think it's still surprisingly hard to pick through and find that truth and know that truth because we're not really in that space spiritually. And I think what this quantum healing session does is it peels back the distractions. It peels back those insecurities, the mental gymnastics that we do. I think it peels back the spaces that we hide behind in our brain that keeps us from accessing that truth because sometimes the truth is not what we really want to hear. We know
Hmm.
it. Like one of the things that came up was in some of the issues that I'm having physically, can you just heal, Beth? And the answer was yes, but I'm not going to. And you're like, I
Yep.
think you were surprised at that moment.
I push back. I always want the healing, so I push back.
Right. And the answer was, listen, Beth made a lifetime of pushing beyond what her body could do. She went without sleep, she went without food, she let herself be in toxic situations and stressful situations, and she achieved far beyond what was needed to be done for reasons that were not necessarily healthy. And so she has learned to use her body without taking care of it. She has pushed it without mindful nurturing. And if we just clear the slate for her, it'll be so easy for her to take that and stay in that rut. So unfortunately, um, she needs to do the work on this. She
Yeah.
needs to slow down and go, wow, I'm feeling tired today. I'm going to go to bed early. Oh my goodness, I didn't get 2 meals in today or 3 meals in today. And that's
Yeah.
something that not because I'm being punished, but because it's up to me to protect and provide for this container. And
Mhm.
I have waited a lifetime for other people to take care of me. And the truth is that's my job. That's
Mhm.
my job first. And I just was like, it's okay. I'm going to keep pulling out of that well. And then one day there's nothing in the well and you want to
Mhm.
get angry, but you can't. And so one of the things I'm learning in that balance is love this body, love this 3 dimensions. Make sure you are resourced and fill. And that's a thing I had to learn because it also touched on the self-erasing part. You can't have needs. You can't take care of yourself. You take care of everybody else first. So this was one of those harder lessons and I'm in it. I'm in the
Yeah.
class.
Yeah. It was very interesting because, I mean, yeah, the subconscious, I do ask for the physical healing, and when I asked for the body to be physically healed, and I asked the subconscious, "Can you heal that?" And it said, "Yes." And I said, "Are you doing that now?" And it said, "No."
And I can remember, like, even when I'm the one that's communicating it, going, of course not.
Yeah.
I know this is my work to do.
Yeah. Well, and I know and sometimes you do have to you push back and you can get, sometimes they'll be like, "Okay," and you
Yes,
can get a little bit or,
yes,
things out of it and it was like, "Nope." And but I think that at the same time, just like what you said, it is that reminder of this healing is there for me. And yes,
yes,
I do have to do my part,
yes, yes.
you
And
know?
I know that more healing will continue to come. In the last 3
Mhm.
months, I've been stronger, which is the word I'm using, than I have in all of my adult life. Physically
Yeah.
stronger, physically more energy. And that's enough for me to have the resources then to do the next step, which is making sure I'm fueling my body and making sure I'm resting my body, which are big ones for me. So
Yeah. Well, and I always remind people, just as much as I can ask for the healing, so can you.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's there for you every single day, and all you have to do is just ask and receive and believe that it's possible, right? That's
right.
the other side of it is believing that it's possible. Well, and we asked a lot of questions. So, was there an answer to any of your questions that really like stood out? Something that really shifted your perspective of things or changed the way you saw something?
So many things. Like I and what's going to happen is as I keep going back to the recording, there'll be another thing. And then
Mhm.
another thing, if you've ever read like the Four Agreements, you go in and you read the book, you can still go back and read it and get more things, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's definitely how I think of our session. Um, but what I most number one took away from that was it's not an either or. And that means it's a new path. It's really interesting how there's a thread, if we want to use that analogy, in my life of little seeds that have been sown along the way, that you get to this point and you're like, oh, yeah, truth. So it was 2017, and I met a woman who was supposed to be like a life coach of some kind. And we went and had lunch one day. And she asked me to tell her about my work in the past. And so I'm giving her my accomplishments, and they're big, they're good. And in my brain, I'm going, oh, who cares? Like, so what? And then she says, so what do you want to do next? And I tell her something, and she's like, oh, it sounds pretty similar to what you've done in the past. I said, yeah, do you know where all of the challenges will be and what you'll do? Yes. And so you've got the strategy all worked out and you know what to anticipate. Yes. And she goes, well, then it's not your path.
Yeah.
What do you mean? And she says, life is about learning. You've already done this. You've already been on this path. And the new path is just scaring you. And so
Yeah.
I thought, that not either or was like, I know how to do one or the other. I know how to erase myself to the point where I live a very small compartmentalized life. I know how to be big and successful. And so
Yeah.
I don't know what tomorrow holds. And I am consistently every day reminding myself as I make choices in my life. Doesn't have to be an either or. So what is neither of that look like? What would be a healthy place to stop? What would be the right next step to make? And it's a whole new way of looking at the choices I'm making in life because it's not just second nature. Is there anything that can get my mom and I to have the kind of relationship I've always wanted? Is there something that I'm missing so I can get her? Notice I'm like, I don't need to do anything. I need her to change. Uh, and what that did was completely release me from a lifetime of longing and expectation and lack of fulfillment in that relationship. I'm completely free of it.
Mm. So good. Oh, so good.
I felt a sense of freedom and power. I want to say, as somebody who lived for many decades under a deep sense of conditioning, this was truly where I more fully, in a more obvious way, some of the things that had still been some of the chains that were rooted pretty deep, they're just they're gone. And so I
Mm,
think that, again, what I'm experiencing now in that transformation of being free is choice and joy and empowerment. And I think less about obligation and responsibility, right? And uh, I gained a deeper faith in the steps that I'm making and a deeper trust in my own sense, uh, my own connection to source.
I love that. That's beautiful. Ugh, so good. Well, what would you tell someone who is curious about a session, but maybe they're still a little bit nervous? What would you tell them?
I would tell them to start with Reiki.
Mm, I
You
love
know,
that.
I don't think that you can come into this um, deep, deep, deep work without taking a few steps, preparing the room, as it
Yeah.
were, because I think that the two things that seemed to be really essential for me was coming in and acknowledging, hey, I'm just feeling soul tired. And what came up for me really just sort of got me into the headspace of these are things that I have been ignoring for a while that are really the crux of the issues, questions that are lingering, things that I'm wasting my time and energy on. And I think it softened me and opened me to a point where I could do this kind of work in the next session. When we had our session where you asked questions, for me, I felt like, um, don't know that I would have actually hit on the things I needed to if I hadn't allowed myself to tell you my story without guardrails,
Hmm.
without worrying about what people would think or, what your reaction would be or how I sounded. And that space alone was like, okay, we're just going to put all the ugly out on the table. And in
Yeah.
doing that, I think that it unlocked doors for me and unlocked dimensions for me where I could find the answers I needed because I wasn't trying to promote oh, let's have an experience.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Oh,
so
I love that.
if somebody was going to come in and do this, I'd say do the steps,
Yeah.
prepare the room. And
Hmm.
and I think it's okay to be a little bit skeptical because you're gonna have this beautiful experience and just stay open. Stay open and curious. And,
Hmm.
I I think your logical mind will want to second guess things. And yet there is a profound sense of truth that you can't ignore. So that'll go away.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love that you mentioned starting with Reiki. I do really see that that is such a beautiful thing that I have the ability to offer that container to just create that safety, to start bringing the nervous system down, to start to help people to land back in their bodies because you have to have that and you have to have that safety before you go into these deeper layers. So I agree with you on that. And I have programs too. I have 3-month programs
Oh, that's
even
great.
to help people,
That's great.
and it includes a QHHT session, and so it can be done, like, when the client is ready and when we've done some sessions prior to and some inner child work, etcetera. So yeah, it's just, again, we didn't put it all on in one day, and so it's layered
No.
work, you
And
know?
honestly, I think that because it was like in pieces, I think each piece had time to sit and kind of
Mhm.
simmer a little bit. And then, it's almost like when you apply something and then the ugly starts to come up and bubble up and the questions bubble up. And I think, time is your friend. Don't push it.
Yeah.
Don't push it. Don't come in with an agenda,
Yeah,
right?
or expectation.
Or expectations. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's the funnest part of it.
Mhm. I agree. Well, thank you so much, and I have to say that this podcast is here because of you. You are
Oh,
the one
thank
that
you.
contacted me and was like, "Can we have a coffee and talk about this?"
Yes.
And we were sitting and
Yes.
chatting, there were 3 of us, and it was like, "Wait a second, I
Let's
think
do
this is a
this.
podcast."
It
And so,
is. It so
anyways,
is.
the remembering session exists because you reached out, you wanted to talk about your session, and I was like, "This is the conversation people need to hear." So, anyways,
Well, let
yeah.
me just say this, I have I'm a very open-hearted person. I've worked with a lot of people, and I have to just thank you from
Mm.
the depths of my soul because in the year that I've known you, barely even a year yet, the impact your work has had and has been tremendous. But it's because you're the vessel, and your vessel
Mhm.
is so safe and your vessel is so um just calming so that you made a way for me to do the work, and I'm just grateful because I think it wasn't too long ago, I think I wrote a post that I truly meant I am living my best life. And as these things come up for me, this is what brings my life meaning and purpose. So it was a session that was transformative. I will continue to like eat off of that session and grow and learn. And so thank you for the work that you do. It is healing us.
Oh, thank you, Beth, and thank you too. We are soul sisters, and
And
you are
we are.
doing amazing work too,
Thank
and
you.
I'm just so grateful for you and grateful for you to be with us today. Thank you all for listening, and, yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
Awesome.